Senator Sinclair, thank you so much.
Welcome.
I really appreciate it. Yeah,
Well, thank you very much for arranging for this.
my pleasure. Thank you for your time. We thought you were the perfect person to speak to because a lot of our credit unions are really interested in embarking on the reconciliation journey. In fact, we're setting up a program that's going to help them with that. So we thought kind of a natural place to start would really be to engage with you and ask you how you think of reconciliation. What comes to your mind when you think of that concept?
In the context of the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, we talked about it in broad terms as being an important issue for Canadian society to recognize that we are all at very different levels of understanding about our history in this country. And we spent a lot of time during the work of the TRC to bring to the attention of Canadians the stories of residential school survivors and the story of Indigenous people in the history of Canadian Confederation, to ensure that people understood why things are the way they are, why the relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people is a tense one, and why young Indigenous people are saying the kinds of things that they are saying now that they are beginning to understand what their parents, their grandparents, their aunties, their uncles, and their communities have been through. And so what our ambition always was, and what my personal ambition is to get people to understand that reconciliation is a Canadian issue. It's not just for Indigenous people. It's about Canada. It's about what we want to be as a country and what we want to contribute to that evolution of us as a country.
So the commissioners of the reconciliation report had a recommendation in Section 92 around the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Rights. Can you tell us a little bit about what the commissioners and yourself were thinking when you crafted that recommendation?
As a result of the work of the TRC, we've come to the conclusion that education is the key to reconciliation. And so when you look at our report, you'll see that we call upon people in Canada to accept that reconciliation may be hard for us to achieve in the near future because we have a lot of people who have a lot of their own understanding of history, their own understanding of this country to overcome and to deal with and to put into a new sphere of knowledge, but that it'll be easier when we start educating young people in schools and in our public institutions to appreciate what this country has really been about. And in furtherance of that, we have called upon the institutions of society and the leaders of society to take it as their responsibility to contribute to that understanding and that evolution in whatever way they can.
I'd like to pick up on that theme. Thank you for that. One element of society, of course, is corporate Canada.
Yes.
And I believe your call to action 92 really called on corporate Canada to endorse or to commit to the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that and your thinking behind that?
The first step in doing that, in addressing that call to action, obviously is to read the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And though Canada has officially adopted it and accepted it, and even though it's a relatively small document, short document, it's only got 46 clauses, most people have never even looked at it. Most people have not considered it. Most people think it's a very complicated, legalistic type of document, but it's actually quite straightforward. It's written largely by Indigenous contributors at the United Nations, not all of whom were lawyers, and all of whom wanted it to be understandable to their Indigenous communities and to reflect their thinking from their Indigenous communities all around the world. And what it was intended to do was to reflect the legal and social, cultural oppression that almost all Indigenous societies have experienced around the world, and what needs to be done by nation states in order to fix the problems that have resulted from those oppressions. And so by reading the UN Declaration, people will, I think, become aware of the kinds of things that Indigenous people feel are important to their revitalization as peoples and their revitalization as communities, and that will allow them to do what we think is the first step in reconciliation, which is to be able to achieve a position of self-respect. Ultimately, reconciliation is about establishing a relationship of mutual respect, but you can't have mutual respect if one side of the relationship can't even enjoy self-respect. And so, because Canada and many nation states around the world have spent so much time oppressing and denying and even denigrating the validity of Indigenous cultures, Indigenous languages, Indigenous peoples, and their history, their traditions and customs, we believe that they should be given the right, and nation states have an obligation to assist in their coming to a better understanding of who they are.
So, for credit unions that are about to embark on this journey, what would you recommend? Where would you recommend they start for the individuals who are part of the credit union, but also the credit union itself? Where can we most effectively advance reconciliation from your experience?
Well, the credit union movement, I think, has a particularly important role to play here because you are about members.
Right.
You are about the people who belong to the credit unions across the country. And you are about ensuring that your credit unions represent and enhance the position of your members. And you can do that by ensuring that the function of each credit union in Canada is conducted in such a way as to better reflect this history in this country and the relationship that your movement, your organization needs to have, needs to create for your members so that they can understand that this is not a dangerous conversation. This is in fact a conversation about what they want for their children. And what they want for their children is better than what they've had.
Right. Right. So that we talked about the kind of entity, the corporate entity, but what about the people that constitute the corporate entity, like the staff and the board members? Is there anything in particular they can do as personal individuals?
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to looking at the fundamental tools that are now available to learn how to utilize them, to enhance their own knowledge, enhance their own understanding of what it is that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission talked about, but also about how the position that they hold within the credit union movement or the credit union movement itself can objectively meet the challenges of the various calls to action, but particularly the one about enhancing its contribution as a corporate entity.
So when you look out at the landscape of corporate behavior, what do you see as exemplary in terms of moving towards reconciliation? And can you maybe talk to us about an example or two that you'd be familiar with?
Well, I can say that some of the church organizations have really done a turnaround when it comes to the issue of reconciliation and their desire to move forward. Protestant churches generally have really made an effort to not just change their attitude, but change their institutions to better reflect their relationship with Indigenous people, but also to educate their members and to ensure that their staff, people who work for them, their ministries, all understand what it is that they can do in their everyday life and in their professional life that will institutionalize this new attitude better and will make their institution a better corporate citizen. And so I think looking at the way the Anglican Church and the Presbyterian Church have worked to, and the United Church have worked to change their own understanding of this relationship and their own understanding of their contribution to the negative relationship, because that's important.
Sure.
To atone for that and then to do something about it. So that's what I think we need to do. There are other entities out there that are working in this direction, but right now we're at the learning stage. We're at the stage where corporate Canada is trying to come to an understanding about what they can do better. And part of it is about hiring, training those that are working, changing the goals and objectives and the means by which corporate entities do their work so that they are more in keeping with maintaining that positive relationship, and also to respecting the relationship that Indigenous people have with this country as well.
A lot of work to do. Thank you so much, Senator. That was a great conversation. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes.